Welcome back to another episode of the A-10 Insider Podcast here on the Field of 68 Media Network. The A-10 tournament is here. It starts, we're recording this on Monday night. It starts on Tuesday afternoon. We're dropping this thing on Tuesday morning, and there is nobody else on planet Earth that I want to talk to more when it comes to the A-10 tournament than the man, the myth, the legend, the guy that is going to be covering this event for NBC Sports, Matt McCall. Matt, what's going on, man? How you doing? It's good to see you.
Rob, it's been a year since we've done this. I feel like last year at this time we did the same thing. We previewed last year's tournament. Had a great tournament. It was a lot of fun. It was exciting. And VCU took it home. Ace Baldwin, Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and now he's doing the same thing up at Penn State. So we'll see who steps up to the plate this year.
Yeah, I know. Every single prediction that we made for last year's A-10 tournament preview was 100% correct. I remember that. Like we nailed it. Every single game we picked correctly. So let's see if we can find a way to do that again, man.
That's what it's about. We're going to pick some sleepers. We're going to pick, who we think can win the whole thing. Richmond going into it the other day was a little bit shocking, going on the road and losing to George Mason, but George Mason's good. And George Mason won that game without Keyshawn Hall. Like, think about that. He did not play. He was available. Tony Skinn elected not to play him and didn't really need him in that game. Great job by him.
Which is wild to say. You're playing the team that's all alone in first place, and you don't need the guy that has been your best player this season, and you go and you beat him by 20.
Could be first team all league come tomorrow.
Yep.
I think he was going into that game. He was fourth in the league in scoring and third in rebounding. I mean, he's a first team all league caliber player. So the fact that Mason was able to knock them off. Now, you could say Richmond celebrated too early. They celebrated their championship on Wednesday, but you need to celebrate championships. But you would expect, hey, this is the first time they've won a regular season league title. We don't want to share it. We don't want to share this with Loyola Chicago. We're going to go on the road. We're going to take care of business against George Mason, but they didn't. And now you've got Drew Valentine, who finished dead last in the league last year, got a share of the league title this year. I mean, how impressive is that, Rob, to think about that? Dead last year, league title this year. I mean, he's got my vote for A-10 Coach of the Year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Who would you pick? Would you pick Mooney? Would you pick Drew? I think both of them have a very strong argument for it.
They both have a strong argument for it, but just to see where his program was last year and the resilience that team showed to fight back and win it this year, I think you got to give it to Drew Valentine. You have to.
Yep. Yeah. That's where I tend to lean as well. All right, let's here's where I want to start with this, okay? Dayton is the one team in this conference that is pretty much a guarantee to make it to the NCAA tournament this year, right? They're right now what they're playing for is to try to find a way to claw up to back to like a 4 seed line as opposed to drop it to like a 7 seed line, right? Like that's what's in play with Dayton this year. How important is it for them to one, win this tournament, and two, is that something that Anthony Grant would even be prioritizing right now?
Well, I think he's prioritizing winning the tournament, no question about it, especially because they didn't win the regular season. And I think that team is built and wants to win a championship. So I think there is a priority to win the tournament. Javon Bennett's health. If you look at the game the other night against VCU, Rob, the only players that scored for Dayton were the starters. Nobody else scored a field goal in the game. Like, that's crazy to even think about. And they knocked off VCU in overtime at home. So when you had an overtime game at home, nobody coming off the bench recorded a field goal. Like, that's the only players in the game that started were that scored were the 5 starters. That's crazy to think about. So the first thing for Dayton is, where is Bennett's health? Because I think they're going to need him to win 3 games in 3 days and win this tournament. So health-wise, is he in the lineup? Still haven't heard anything, haven't seen anything come out on whether or not he is or isn't. With the time off, they played on Friday night. They don't play. Essentially they got the double bye, so he got extra time off.
They got until Thursday, right? March 14th.
Until Thursday, no question. So where is his health? Is he back in? I think that's big. Deron Holmes is going to win Player of the Year tomorrow, in my opinion. Maybe Jordan King gets the nod. He had an outstanding year. Best guard in the A-10 by far. But you just look at when you have a player like Holmes who leads the league in scoring, and I think he's second in rebounding. I just think it's so difficult to give it to Jordan.
It's got to be him. It's got to be him for Player of the Year.
It has to be. I mean, in our Field of 68 group text, you texted, Give me, your 5 All-Americans. Give me your top 5 outside of RJ Davis, Dalton Connect, um, Zach Edey, obviously. Like, who's your next guy? And I said Deron Holmes. I put him in that
Mhm.
category. So, I just think they got to get Bennett, make sure he's in the lineup. But I think this is a priority for Dayton to win this conference tournament. I really do. But to only have 5, your 5 starters are the only ones that record a field goal in that win against VCU. They're going to need more than that. They're going to have to be deeper than that to win 3 games in 3 days.
All right, so this sounds very strange to frame it this way, but Richmond and Loyola, the two teams that won a share of the A-10 regular season title over Dayton, what do they have to do to be able to win it, right? Because both of them are kind of competing at this point for the automatic bid. We'll start with Richmond. What do they have to do to be able to win this? What has to happen for us to look up on Sunday, March 17th? I believe it's a 1 p.m. tip off, right?
1
Look up
p.m.
at
on
three.
Sunday.
Yeah, look up at 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, and Chris Mooney is up there cutting down some more nets.
Well, he's been there before,
Mm-hmm.
and me and you talked about this on the field of 68 as well. Like, whoever put that billboard up about fire Chris Mooney, like, where is that guy?
Yeah,
Because
I want to
that
talk
is
to him right
totally
now.
absurd. That guy is hiding somewhere, because that's the most absurd thing. You're talking about a guy that is 3rd all time in Atlantic 10 wins, and what a job he's done with this team. I give the nod to Richmond over Loyola Chicago in this tournament, and here's why, Rob. On a no-day prep, and I know the semifinals, you'll have a 1-day prep. It is such a difficult team to prepare for how they play. And I understand they play during the conference season, but when you have a 7'2" center that you're running your offense through, that
Mm-hmm.
leads your team in assists, there's nobody else that you're playing against in the Atlantic 10 that is like Richmond. So just in terms of their style of play, how they defend, you have the best guard in the league, and they run their offense through a 7'2" center. And Mooney has done a better job than anybody in terms of just adjusting to his personnel, in my opinion. He's been so hell-bent on running the Princeton. This is what we're going to do. And yes, they still have Princeton concepts, but they're not just a straight Princeton team. But all of a sudden, Neil Quinn comes out on the perimeter, the ball goes through him, you have back cuts, tons of movement around him. And then, oh, by the way, you may have to guard Jordan King in a middle pick and roll as well, or they're running pin down dribble handoffs for him. I mean, that's a lot of different things to prepare for. So I give them the nod just because of that. But the toughness, Philip Austin, the way that Loyola plays, and especially when you watch them at home, I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
environment was ridiculous. Now we're on a neutral site, so that'll be quote unquote neutralized a little bit. But the toughness and the fearlessness that Loyola Chicago plays with is really impressive. I mean, it is.
There's a level of confidence for Loyola too.
There's a level of confidence, and I'll say this too: you go back to that game against Dayton that they played a
Mhm.
couple Friday nights at home. Like, how good was Braden Norris?
Yes.
Like, Rob, I thought late in the game, the ball was in his hands and he made the right play. He made the right play coming down the stretch of that game. Whether he was in a middle ball screen, going down the lane, finding his teammates, he was unselfish and he's the X factor for this team. Des Watson is terrific. Philip Alston is outstanding. Kind of that mismatch power forward. How do you use him? Do you switch him in ball screens? What are you doing? And then Braden Norris's decision making. And
Mm-hmm.
here's the crazy thing, Rob, and I'm such a fan of whoever wins the league. Like, I don't know that Loyola Chicago is going to have a player on first team all league tomorrow. I don't. But they arguably have the best team in the league, which is crazy. It's crazy to think about. That's the substance. That's the toughness that they play with. They don't have guys that are jumping off the stat sheet, but they play really, really hard and they play the right way.
Yeah, and Loyola still has some remnants from the 2021 team that made it to, was that the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight? I think they made it to the Elite Eight, right? When they upset Illinois. Obviously they've been to a Final Four before. It was not with this group. It was with a different team, but that is still a program where there's a level of expectation to be able to have a certain level of success in tournament runs. And Richmond, 2022, they knocked off number 5 Iowa. They ended was that Chris Murray? No, Keegan Murray's college career. They beat that Iowa team. So both of those programs have had success in situations like this. The last team that's getting the double bye, the UMass Minutemen, Frank Martin, Matt Cross, Josh Cohen. I got to be honest with you. I think this is my favorite team to watch. I don't think they're the best team, but I think this might be my favorite team to watch for a lot of different reasons. But one, Josh Cohen, I don't think can jump over a phone book. And he's average. What is he average? Like 18 and 10 or something like that. And then Matt Cross is playing without a tooth, Matt. He's playing without a tooth for intimidation reasons only, right? He could have gotten this thing fixed.
You love the story about when he decided to drive the bus at prep school just to get to practice.
Oh, he told me a better one when we had him on the pod. McCall, you are going to love this. He was at an AU tournament with I believe he played for BABC. Was that Leo's team, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess Leo always has a dog that he brings to every event.
Yep. Every game.
And then Leo asked Matt to take the dog for a walk between games. So he walked the dog across the court, didn't have poop bags, and the dog took a dump in the middle of the court. And Matt was just like, well, I guess I got to leave this here, and just walked off and let the dog poop in the middle of the floor. One of the reasons I love UMass is because I feel like every time I ask Matt Cross to tell me a story, he's going to tell me something where it just completely blows my mind. He's a ridiculous human, and I love every second of it.
You know what? I also think, Rob, they have arguably the best front court duo in the Atlantic 10. I think Rasul.
I don't even think it's arguable. Like I think that they do.
Yeah, I think it's there. I think Diggins is outstanding. Hank and Sanford, to me, when they bring him in the game, I feel like he's a bit of an X factor for him.
Mm-hmm.
He comes in, he plays really, really hard. He impacts winning. He gives them a lift. I look at some of the games that they lost, and I'm just going to go back to the St. Bonaventure game at home. Guards shot selection. I think Jalen Curry is outstanding. I think he is, going forward for this UMass team, he will be one of the best guards in the Atlantic 10. That's the biggest key because they have front court, they have toughness, they have rebounding. Can they take care of the basketball in this tournament and their shot selection when games get tight? The ball needs to be in certain players' hands. Diggins needs to be the guy that takes threes because you look at UMass, they have not shot the ball well from the perimeter, right? They're near the bottom of the Atlantic 10 in terms of three-point shooting. They've made timely threes at times, especially Diggins. But Diggins needs to be the guy that's taking shots coming down the stretch, and they've got to play through Cross and Cohen. They can do that. I would not be shocked if this team ends up in the Atlantic 10 tournament final. I really wouldn't because they have that toughness. They're the best rebounding team in the league. And look, what a message to send the Atlantic 10. We're going to win an Atlantic 10 tournament before we go to the MAC. Okay, we're just going to make sure that we understand that.
Yeah. Right? Oh, man. The last team that I would throw in as a contender or favorite, or however you want to phrase it, like to me, the top tier of the A-10 is 5 teams, and the 5th one is VCU. Yep. Getting healthy was enormous for the Rams. They didn't necessarily play their best basketball of the season down the stretch, but I do think that what they lose 3 in a row and 4 out of 6 or something like that. So they fell all the way to a 5 seed, but. That's not, they got to play an extra game, but that's not a team that I want to see if I'm UMass as the 4 seed, right? You get VCU having a game to warm up against one of the bottom teams in the league. That's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this team just battled injuries, and I think you look at them early on in the season, and everyone's like, what's wrong with VCU? What's wrong with VCU? Well, one, you have a new coach, and it's a coach that's outside of the Shaka Smart tree. And you had Havoc, you had then Will Wade, you had Mike Rhodes, and everyone still kind of played that similar style of we're going to recruit really big time athletes. We're going to be in passing lanes. We're going to press. This is how we're going to play. We're going to rely on our defense to win us games. And Coach Odom brings a different style and a different flavor, which it takes them getting used to. But despite all that, it also takes them getting healthy. Zeb Jackson, outstanding player. He decided to stay during this coaching change. He missed a bunch of games. Bairstow got hurt in a scrimmage. He missed a ton of games. So they really haven't had their entire roster.
The Oklahoma transfer wasn't eligible until
Joe Bamasil.
Yeah.
He is an A-10 legend. He spent a bunch of his career at GW as well. So, and he's a big time talent. Huge. So look, they've got length. They've got athleticism. Toby Lawal, you look at some of his highlights, he's like in video game mode. Like he's got rockets in his shoes when he goes above and grabs rebounds or finishes plays. So I'm with you. I think this team is dangerous. I would not be shocked if they make a run all the way to the finals.
What
And
happened
here,
in those last three? Like what happened in the 3 games they lost down the stretch?
well, they lose at Richmond, which is a difficult game. The
Rivalry
league
game. Yeah.
champion. It's a rivalry game. They lost 76-79. They lose by one possession. Duquesne, they didn't play well. Just calling it like it is. They had Duquesne at home. They didn't play well, and then they lose at Dayton. So I think when you look at those 3 games, they lose to two of the best teams in the league, and then
By
they lose
one
to
possession.
Duquesne,
Yeah.
where it was almost a letdown game coming off that Richmond game.
Yeah,
That,
because
that, that
if you
really,
remember that, I think that if they beat Richmond in a rivalry game, they still have a chance to win the
to
A-10
win the
regular
regular.
season title. Yeah, so
So that Duquesne loss to me is just a letdown.
yeah.
Here's the only other team that I want to throw in this category. And based on their record, you may be looking at me kind of like, really, Matt? St. Bonaventure. Charles Pride,
Bonds, yes.
Micah Adams-Woods. Daryl Banks has not put it together this year. Daryl Banks at last year looked like a first-team all-league player at times. Chad Venning, one of the best front court players in the entire league.
Mm-hmm.
Had they not lost, where they laid an egg against GW, who's wounded, they have starters out. Had they not lost to GW, they're playing that St. Louis game, and they're getting a double bye if they beat St. Louis on their home floor on senior night because they beat UMass twice. So I'm looking at this Bonnie's team. I'm looking at Mark Schmidt, one of the most underrated coaches in the country. They have talent. Charles Pride and Micah Adams-Woods, when I looked at it to start the season, I thought were two of the better transfers in the Atlantic 10. I think they can make a run. I do. They haven't put it together for multiple games this season, but the talent's still there, and the man calling ball plays is still there. And they've had some time coming off that loss at home to St. Louis, which nobody saw coming, but St. Louis still has Gibson Jimerson. They still have Terrence Hargrove. They have a talented roster. Larry Hughes is coming into his own, Larry Hughes Jr. I just
It makes
think
me feel so old, by the way, to hear Larry Hughes Jr.
How about that?
Yeah.
I just think the Bonnies, I don't know. I'm maybe I'm a Mark Schmidt homer, but I think the Bonnies,
No,
I
you're
think they
not.
have the talent to get there.
If you're going to be a homer, like Mark Schmidt is one of the guys that you probably want to be a homer when it
No
comes
question.
to. I still can't quit. They're not in the same tier. They're definitely in like the I'm doing air quotes sleeper category. The teams that can make a run. I can't quit St. Joe's.
I'm with you.
I know that they haven't had the
Eric
year that we
Reynolds,
expected.
Brown.
Yep, they
I'm
beat
with
Villanova
you.
on the road. They should have beat Kentucky on the road. I love their guards. And when it comes to March, you know what they kind of remind me of? And tell me if you think this is crazy. Last year and the year before that, Miami. They were a team that just had a ton of bucket getters where Jim Larinaga didn't necessarily have the greatest regular season and they didn't necessarily care all that much about defense, but it was a situation where he had a bunch of guys where he could pick the matchup that he wanted to take advantage of and say, okay, we're going to let our dude cook right here because I don't think that your guy can stop him. We're going to let Isaiah Wong go one-on-one. We're going to let Jordan Miller go get a bucket. It's Nigel Pack's turn. And I feel like St. Joe's has a little bit of that where if you run into them if they get hot at the wrong time, right? They can pick off pretty much anybody in this league. So St. Joe's is one that I think can make a run. And then if Keyshawn Hall's back, like George Mason is absolutely a team that can win a couple games here. And once you get to the semis, if you're playing on Saturday still, anybody's got a chance. That's what it is in March.
Anybody has a chance. I'm with you on St. Joe's. Totally agree. They got 5 guys averaging double figures. The balance on the offensive end of the floor. Eric Reynolds, you can make a case for the best guard in the league. Rasheer Fleming, the last regular season game, I think he had 23 points in that game in their win over Davidson. So I'm with you. And then Tony Skinn, he knocks off Richmond the other day, and he talked about himself in the third person. He said, you know who knows how to make a run come March? Tony Skinn knows how to make a run come March. He's exactly right. In 2006, they made a run all the way to the Final Four. They don't make that run to the Final Four with Jim Larinaga if it wasn't for Tony Skinn. So they have the talent. They proved they can beat one of the best teams in the league. How about this? They beat Richmond coming down the stretch without Keyshawn Hall. They beat Dayton coming down the stretch as well. So they knocked off two of the best teams in the league, one without Keyshawn Hall. So I'm with you on that one too, Doster. That's a dangerous team.
Yeah, that means that Richmond is going to beat whoever wins that game by 40. Because if both of us are on the same page, then you probably want to be on the other side of that one. All right, the teams we have not mentioned yet: Duquesne, Rhode Island, St. Louis, LaSalle, GW, Fordham, Davidson. Look, GW is what they are. I don't really understand what happened there. I like the pieces on that roster. I like Caputo. I still think that there's something there. I just don't think it's going to be this year that we see the best of it. And Fordham, after everything they did last season, those are the two teams that really surprised me based off what happened in Atlantic 10 play. Is there anything there? Am I grasping at straws? Am I completely out of my mind for saying that a GW team that lost 11 of their last 12 games, like maybe they could pick off LaSalle and get to St. Bonaventure? Like I feel like I'm just throwing shit against the wall here and seeing what sticks.
Well, Garrett Johnson's been out.
Mm-hmm.
So when Buchanan and Johnson were on the floor together, they were the two best freshmen in the Atlantic 10. Bar none. Pull up the numbers. Look at when those two guys were out there. One of them got hurt. I think it was Buchanan first. He missed some time. Johnson wasn't hurt, but he was still trying to play. Then Johnson was out completely. Then Buchanan came back after an injury, and he was still trying to play. So you have to take that with a grain of salt because they were never a deep team. Okay, like how about Kansas? Like if you take Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson, your two best players, off the floor, and you only play 6 guys,
you get 30 piece at Houston.
There you go. So you take Buchanan or Garrett Johnson off the floor when you're only playing 5 or 6 guys, you're going to lose games. Bottom line, their depth has been an issue for them. You take one of those guys out, it's going to be tough to win. But I'll say this too, for both of these guys, Chris Caputo and Coach Ergo, year 2 is hard because you created some expectations in year 1, and maybe there's a couple things got covered up just culturally, or you won some games you weren't supposed to. Year 2 for me, and I'm just speaking on my own experience as a head coach, and both stops that I had was the hardest years I've ever had. Both stops along the way. It's just you're still young. You're still trying to figure out who you are, who your team is. What do you stand for? What are your values? How are you as a leader compared to when you're an assistant coach? I mean, both these guys are in year 2 of being a head coach. I don't care how long Chris Caputo's been an assistant coach. I don't care how long Ergo's been an assistant coach. Like sliding over that chair, there are challenges and different things that you still have to figure out who you are. You got to figure out who you are. So both guys, young head coaches in their tenures, year 2. But I look at what Fordham lost, and they lost a lot off that team. And GW's just never been healthy outside of early on in the season when they were winning games. You take Garrett Johnson or Buchanan, off the floor, it's going to be tough to win. Keeping that group together, I think they've got really good young talent. I really, really like Trey Autry. When I was at practice, when I had a game this year, he looks the part. He's got substance. Obviously he's a coach's son, so he knows. He's been around the game. I think Buchanan is a high character individual that has tremendous talent. So, if Caputo can keep that core together, they're not going to finish near the bottom of the Atlantic 10 next year. I don't believe that, as long as they can stay healthy.
Yeah, I agree. And he'll be able to have some time in the portal with freshmen. He'll be able to build some of that depth. Losing James Mitchell is never going to be easy, but I like where that program is on its trajectory. All right, McCall, I'm putting you on the spot. Give me the team that wins it and who they beat in the title game. Let's go. Official predictions.
Yeah, now I gotta walk into this arena tomorrow.
You want me to go first? I'll go first. You ready for this?
Go first. Yeah.
I'm going to say VCU wins it.
Wow.
They beat Loyola Chicago in the title game. VCU wins it. And they make the run.
VCU wins it. Okay. That is you kind of went out on a limb there. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie.
There's no cold takes on this pod, man. Only hot takes.
There's only hot. I you know what? I think I think because of the style of play, I think because of Jordan King, one of the best guards in the league, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with Richmond. I'm gonna go with them. I think it's just so difficult to prepare for on a 1 day prep. It really is. The movement, the cutting. And I'm going to say that they beat the Flyers in the finals. That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that the Richmond Spiders pick off the Flyers, and I'm going to say that both Dayton and Richmond are going dancing in the NCAA tournament.
There you have it. Coach Matt McCall going out on a limb and picking the number 1 seed to win the A-10 tournament. Matt, it's always a pleasure, man. Enjoy the time in New York tomorrow. It's all there's literally nothing better than this week. I know everyone loves the first week of the NCAA tournament. There's nothing better than this week because we get wall-to-wall day basketball starting Tuesday morning, and it doesn't stop until Selection Sunday. I'm here for it, man. I can't wait. I can't wait to watch more hoops than my mind can just physically process. And it's been a pleasure, man. Always enjoy it.
Man. Always a pleasure.